In these notes, we're going to review some of our angle relationships we've talked about previously, and then we're going to build upon them. So with the first one, we have adjacent. So we know that adjacent means we have two angles that share a side and the vertex. And there is a picture that would go with it. Complementary and supplementary. So complementary means we have two angle measures that add up to be equal to 90 degrees. Supplementary then is when they add up to equal 180 degrees. And again, there's some pictures to go with them. Linear pair means we have two angles that are adjacent and supplementary. Vertical angles is our last one, and that's when we have two angles that are opposite corners, or so they're in opposite corners, when two lines intersect. When this happens, our vertical angles then are two angles that are congruent to each other. What you can see that I wrote in black is a setup for each of those equations if you know that that is the type of angles that you have in your figure. So complementary, we could say angle plus angle will equal 90. Supplementary is angle plus angle equals 180. And that would be the same for linear pair. Vertical angles, since they're congruent, we can say that angle equals angle, and then we can solve for x and plug it back in. Looking at example 1, we are trying to figure out if the pairs that are shown are measures of supplementary angles. So we need to add the two numbers together. So 42 plus 48 gives us 90, and that would mean that it's complementary, not 180 degrees, so that one would be false. 88 plus 92 is equal to 180 degrees, so that one would be true. And now I want you to do letter C. 36 plus 114 is 150, so that would be another false, and then the last one is 180, and that would be a true answer. This next example over here on the right is, there's really 4 different questions, and we want to determine if the description, if these are true definitions or descriptive words to describe what's happening. So we have x and y do not share a side, and the measure of x is 45, the measure of y is 45 as well, so they're the same size, which the following terms could describe. So could describe angle x and angle y, and choose true or false for each item. Well, because they do not share a side, they can not be adjacent. We know definitely if we add the two together, we only get 90 degrees, and supplementary, remember, is 180, so that one's definitely a false. But since they do equal 90 degrees, we know that it's true. It is possible, that's where the could comes in, that they could be vertical angles, and that's because they are congruent to each other, and they're not adjacent, so they could be vertical angles. May not be, but they could. We've done problems like example 2 in class before. We've talked about those. So we have to figure out what the missing angles are. So our angle B over here is vertical, so that would be 130 degrees. A and C then will also be congruent because those are vertical angles, but we know that this whole angle right here, so C plus 130, is going to be supplementary, which means that they will add up to equal 180 degrees. So 130 plus C equals 180 degrees. That means that angle C will be 50 degrees. And remember, 50, our C and our A will be congruent to each other because they are vertical angles. On these next ones, we're just going to go through the setup. So on number 3, these are linear pair angles. Because they are linear pair angles, that means we have angle plus angle equals 180 degrees. So that would be 50 plus x equals 180 degrees, and then our x would be 130 once we solve it. For the second one over here on the right, we see this right angle, so we know that they are complementary. And then for the rest of the setup, we know that that will be angle plus angle equals 90, and then x plus 38 equals 90 when we actually substitute those in. So when we solve, you get x equals 52 degrees. In example 4, I want you to now try this one on your own, and I want you to fill in all your missing angles, and then I will ask you a question about one of those angles. All right, so since AFC together is 150, and this right here is 90, we know this is 90, so the remaining part of this little section is 150 minus 90, so that means this is 60. Because this corner over here is 90, that means this piece is 30. We know this is 90. And then because we have a straight angle here, we know this is also 90 in the lower right, and 90 would be our lower left as well. On example 4, Just whenever you see questions like this, just try to figure out what all the missing angles are first, just in the picture, then fill in your missing answers of what we are looking for. So first off, we tell you that angle 3 is 23 degrees. You again see this 90 degrees right here. And because this is a straight angle, that means that angle 2 would also be 90 degrees. One big thing that you're going to use is that angle 5 and angle 3 are vertical angles. And we know that vertical angles are congruent, so that would be 23 degrees. Now, because we know that our angle right here is 90 degrees, we can take 90 minus 23 and we get 67. Lastly, we know that this whole side is 180 degrees because they're supplementary or linear pair. So we can take 180 minus the 23 and we get 157 degrees for the last missing angle. Now, for example 5, I want you to do this one on your own. First of all, you might want to draw a picture. So our vertical angles, remember that those are formed by two intersecting lines. So I'm going to label this as my S and my T. Now go ahead and solve for the X, and that's all you have to find in this problem. Remember that vertical angles are set up as angle equals angle, so when we have our 2x minus 8 will be equal to 62 degrees, should be the setup. Then once you add your 8 over, you get 2x equals 70, then divide both sides by 2, and we get x equals 35, for example number 5. All right, lastly, we have complementary angles. Remember, as soon as you see that, you want to think of something. And that is, our angle plus angle will equal 90 degrees. So the sum of those angles is equal to 90 degrees. So when they give us angle A and B, that's how the setup should be. A plus B will equal 90. Now if A is 2x and B is 48, you just substitute each of those pieces in there, and then there is your equation you can solve. So if you subtract 48 from both sides, we end up with 2x is equal to 42. Divide both sides by 2 again, and we get x equals 21. And in this one, that's all we're asking for is just the x value.